Space Invaders is an arcade shooter created by Tomohiro Nishikado. Originally manufactured and sold by Taito in Japan, it was released in 1978 and was later licensed for production in the United States by the Midway division of Bally. Commonly recognised as one of video games' forerunners, it ultimately helped pave the way for modern video gaming, and is one of the arcade genre's biggest successes. Despite all this, there was a time when it almost didn't get released. Nishikado spent a year designing the game and necessary hardware for it to run, before it became generally available to the public. Using Atari's Breakout as inspiration, which Nishikado himself loved, he set out to, in his own words, come up with something that was even better. A shooting game that would have the same sense of accomplishment for completing levels and the carnage of destroying targets that he himself adored. A similar layout was used, but rather than allowing an object bounce off you and it become necessary for you to return it to hit a static object, like in his beloved Breakout, instead the player was now able to fire at will to attack a moving enemy. Early designs for these enemies included tanks, battleships and even planes, but Nishikado wasn't happy with their movements due to the then technical limitations which made it difficult to simulate fluid movement. He even considered humans as an enemy at one stage, but felt it unethical. Inspiration eventually came after reading a magazine article about Star Wars. The game, it would have a space theme. He drew further encouragement still from H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds, which he'd watched as a child, and set about initial development of an octopus, squid and crab-like aliens before settling on the designs we all know today. After a year of development, the game was finally finished, having also custom developed the hardware because nothing in Japan at the time was powerful enough to run it. Nishikado was dismayed to find it still wasn't running how he'd intended it to. There was simply too much on screen. You see, in the game the player controls a laser-like cannon that can scroll horizontally back and forth across the bottom of the screen as they fire at a descending foe. 5 rows of 11 aliens each to be exact. With each alien the player defeats, they earn points. As is probably obvious, the main aim of the game being to defeat all aliens on screen. Nishikado's creation of both Japanese and American parts just couldn't handle the speed he'd intended though. What was interesting was what happened when more aliens were defeated. The Intel 8080 CPU and the Fujitsu MB14241 video shifter no longer had to work as hard. Neither did the SN76477 sound chip. Both the game's speed and music began to speed up. The more enemies that were killed, the faster the processor could render those that remained. Nishikado had accidentally invented the difficulty curve. Rather than try and remove it or adjust the game to compensate for the gameplay or the music speed increase, he decided to leave it in. It became a challenging gameplay mechanic. He went on to show his work colleagues, who both enjoyed and praised the game. His bosses, they weren't as happy unfortunately. They were doubtful such a challenging arcade game could be made successful. Those in upper level sales management just couldn't keep up with its pace. Nishikado has admitted that he himself was actually terrible at it and often struggled to make it past the first level of Space Monsters, as it was then called. They decided to take a gamble after both work colleagues and a test group seemed to really like the game. It was rebranded as Space Invaders and released in June of 1978 as a cocktail cabinet, with its monochrome graphics now boosted by a rainbow coloured cellophane overlay which replicated colour graphics. By 1978's year end, 100,000 Taito branded Space Invaders machines were across Japan and had amassed over $60 million. It's no surprise, by 1981 over 360,000 cabinets had been sold worldwide, grossing more than $1 billion. It was so popular that arcade owners felt like they were printing money, with the machine often paying for itself within a week of purchase. The gamble, it had truly paid off. It's not perfect, but what is, and does contain several other bugs, including another in its famous kill screen, where a programming glitch means the player would automatically die no matter what action they took. No, it's not perfect, but at the time it was damn close. Nishikado himself stated, "It was a shock to see all those people sitting in front of my game." He would occasionally visit Tokyo arcades after the game's release, but was actually contractually prevented by Taito from revealing that he was the game's designer. While I'm sure this was frustrating, it seemed to also have been a sense of relief because he worried about how terrible it would be if a critical bug might appear. Space Invaders stands alone though. It's believed by many to be one of the most popular video games ever. Hideo Kojima himself states that it's the first game that impressed him and got him interested in gaming, as do John Romero and John Carmack. Even the great Shigeru Miyamoto believes Space Invaders revolutionised the gaming industry. This is very high and deserved praise for one of the earliest shooters ever made, and paved the way for so many games to follow. Space Invaders invented the concept of a difficulty curve, was the first game to ever save a player's high score, the first time a player's target could actually fire back at them, and even the first game where players were given multiple lives. Believe it or not, it doesn't even end there. Space Invaders was actually the first game to use a continuous soundtrack. All this said, it should be no surprise to anyone that it has won several awards, and that even the Guinness Book of Records acknowledges it as being one of the most successful arcade games of all time.